Hi, everyone. Stephen Van Tassel here, wildlife control consultant, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife as part of the Pest Geek podcast family. Glad to have you along today. Weather's looking kind of good out here in Montana, so the snow is mostly gone for now. But I know it'll be coming again soon enough, and I trust you're getting ready for winter and holidays here. We're looking at Thanksgiving next week, and I hope that by the time you hear this podcast that you had a blessed Thanksgiving meal with your friends and family, and you take a few days off to relax and refresh before you get out and hit it again before the Christmas holiday season comes upon you. So always make sure you take a little bit of time to be with your friends and family, because when you're looking at death, you're not going to sit in your deathbed and ask yourself, boy, I probably should have set another mousetrap. So think about the most important things in life. Work is important, not saying it isn't, but you want to be sure you're thinking about some of the higher values in life. So are you living to work, or are you working to live? So definitely keep that distinction in mind. All right. Well, I got a question from one of our listeners who was kind enough to send it to me. He wanted me to discuss common mistakes that people make when they are doing mouse control jobs. So what kind of advice could I give the technicians who are looking to get into mouse control or required to do mouse control, how we can reduce those callbacks? And so I'm still working on the revision of my book. If I can find it here. Oh, here it is. Yep. So I am looking to revise this particular book, and I'm still at it. It's a slow go, but this is Frischman's book, second edition. You can certainly purchase this if you like. Pretty reasonable price. You can get it from my website at wildlifecontrolconsultant.com, or you can purchase it at Lulu. It's LULU.com. Just look up Vertebrate Pest Handbook and you should be able to find it there. Pretty inexpensive. Basically what it has is just a whole series of questions and answers on various things related to rodent control. So the revision that I'm making is actually just going to focus on the commensal rodents, because this book actually goes into more than commensal rodents, but I have other books for that, and I wanted to just focus on the commensal rodents. So it's being thoroughly revised, and so if you are a business owner and you have technicians and you're looking for little quizzes that you can try to make up, that's what this book will be for. It'll give you true, false, sometimes multiple choice. It's primarily true, false, matching, short answer is the style of the book, and then you can create these and hand them out to your workers and kind of keep them on their toes a little bit and keep them educated about things related to commensal rodents. So I figured let's talk about commensal rodents here today, primarily house mice. And why do I focus on house mice? Because let's be blunt. Can we be honest here? If your client has rats, they got a lot. They probably have mice, and they're big issues there, right? So I know rats are sexy, and I know they get all the attention, and they're much more photogenic, and they're easier to photograph. They're bigger, and I get all that, right? But when I was in Massachusetts doing field work, I had very little rat work. Did I have a few rat jobs? Yep. But it was pretty rare. Now, you may be in New York City, you may be in some of these larger cities where rats are a big issue. I'm not saying that it's not an issue, it is. But for, if you're along the coasts or maybe in Phoenix, those are going to be issues, right? But for a lot of us in the middle part of the country, rats aren't really that big of a deal. You maybe have some wood rats, what we call pack rats. Sure, you're going to have that, but mice are everywhere. And they're really under-respected. They don't get the respect that they deserve because they do a lot more damage. And I blame Mickey Mouse for this, right? They're cute, and they are cute. I think mice are really cool, right? But they're incredibly destructive. And I'm not even talking about disease. I think disease can be a little overplayed. I had an argument with a person who was part of who got a degree in public health, and we had a little bit of a a little bit of an argument on that point, and she really wanted to push the disease thing, and I'm like, yeah, they're there, but if it was as dangerous as everyone kind of claims, why aren't we seeing a lot more sicknesses? Now, I understand that there's underreporting and all that kind of thing, but come on, come on. Let's be frank about it, right? So I don't want people's might have mice in their house. I don't want that. Let's kill them all. But I do know that the damage structurally that mice do to a building occurs all the time. So the longer those mice are running around your walls or the client's walls, it's destroying the insulation. They're peeing on it. They're pooping on it. So that's degrading the insulation. I'm not even talking about disease. So perhaps the first mistake that I think technicians make is they may talk about disease and not talk about the structural issues involved with mice. That is, the longer those mice are running around the walls, they're degrading the insulation. They're peeing and they're pooping, which also degrades the insulation because insulation shouldn't be wet. And you don't want, feces in it. And then remember that mice like to gnaw, just like any rodent, right? They like to gnaw things. So that means over time, they're going to find some wires. They're going to start chewing on that. I think the statistic I saw was, if memory serves, is 20% of all fires have an unknown electrical origin. Where do you think that electrical problem came from? Now, I'm not suggesting that every fire has an electrical origin, right? But there's a lot. If we have people who have these old buildings, you might have been, I lived in a city that had old buildings, and, every now and again you'd see something in the news. It's like, oh, this, 1910 house is burning up. Well, what caused that? If it's not a space heater or someone having a candle that they knocked over, or maybe or a cigarette they didn't put out well enough, what caused that? Well, building that old with balloon construction, do you think maybe mice got in there eventually and then started, after 50, 60 years, finally did something with old wiring and boom, things finally went, right? So that's what I would certainly suggest, and that is emphasize, because sometimes your clients may not take mice seriously. Now you may say, well, they're calling me, so they take it serious enough. Maybe what they want you to do is to spread around the magic toxicant, and they'll still live like pigs. That's not really a solution. I mean, it's a great moneymaker for pest control operators, right? Because now you have a cash cow. It's easy to just throw rodenticide all over the place. I know, in your bait stations, right? But are you really solving the problem for the client, or are you just simply harvesting mice? All right, so there's a difference between solving the problem and just harvesting and making money off the problem. Now, I understand that clients sometimes won't take your advice. Maybe they can't afford your advice. I'm not talking about people who can't afford it. But we all know that we make financial decisions all the time. When I was at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, we were talking with a professor about students being poor. And he looked right at me and he said, our students aren't poor. I always have money to take off and go to Florida for spring break. They're not poor. And it made an interesting point to me, and that was, we all have money for what we want. What our priorities are. Generally speaking, in the U.S., there's very few people that are just eating out of a garbage can poor. There are some, but but they're not calling you for mouse control, right? So in terms of the clients you're dealing with, they have money. It's just a matter of priorities, right? So that's something to certainly think about. So number one, think about the structural damage commensal rodents cause in a structure. They damage the insulation, they can damage the wires, and then they're peeing and they're urinating and defecating on all that as well. That's a problem. Okay? So what's the next thing? The next mistake that technicians can make, and that is a failure to properly inspect. All pest control, whether you're dealing with insects, whether you're dealing with vertebrates, the foundation is a proper inspection. If you don't know what you're dealing with, and accurately so, you're not going to get the job done appropriately. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to get the job done. Let me give an illustration. You may have a client, you're living in let's say you're in XYZ state, right? And all of a sudden, your clients are calling you up and they're saying, I got something running around in my attic, and you're looking around the building and you're just doing a ground inspection, and you're not that experienced with inspection for squirrels and that sort of thing. And you're saying, I don't see any 3-inch holes up there around the building, so it can't be squirrels. So I'm just going to go up into the attic. It's got to be mice. And I'm just going to put some placement packs, right? Because we're not going to toss them. We're going to put some placement packs up there, and that'll solve the problem. Lo and behold, you put your toxicant up there, and all of a sudden they say the noise stops. Voila! You got it right. But did you? Or were you poisoning flying squirrels? Because you didn't really inspect the attic. You just stuck your head up into it and just threw a bunch of placement packs around and then charged them whatever your fee was. That's not really an inspection. Did you solve the problem? Well, yeah, kind of. Was it legal? No. But do you care? Unfortunately, too many people don't care. And so we're poisoning flying squirrels. And understand, flying squirrels are protected in some states. Are they protected in yours? I just think that's inappropriate. Doesn't mean that mistakes can't happen. It does mean that we need to be professional about what we're doing. And so, do you know the difference between flying squirrel sign versus mouse sign, right? Flying squirrels tend to defecate and urinate before they exit a building like a bat. So you'll often see their feces tends to have this syrupy look to it. Like, think of it like thin molasses. And you'll often see toilets just below the whole escape hole. You can say, well, I'd see the hole from the outside. Probably not, because it's a 1/2 inch wide. Think of it like a rat. And they can be coming out the ridge vent, and it's going to be hard to see that from the ground. Because are you using binoculars? Did you at least put a ladder up and so you can get closer to that ridge vent? Do you have a powerful enough spotlight, not a flashlight, spotlight to illuminate dark areas to see if there's a gap there? If you didn't, get a copy of my wildlife damage inspection handbook and teach you some of those principles. But so make sure you're performing a proper inspection. If you're not tired or dirty following your inspection, you probably didn't do it right, because you're looking for all of those places where the mice are running. Now, that's a lot of time. That can be a lot of work. Who wants to spend that time? Time is money, right? So you need to get to the next job because the next person's yelling at you to get there on time. Where do you need to look when we're dealing with mice? You have got to focus on heat. This is particularly important during the wintertime, where mice, because of the size of what's called the surface to body ratio, that means they have, for their size, there's a lot more surface area for their small size. So they're losing heat constantly. So they are heat stressed, and especially in cold weather. So they want to find ways to lower their heat stress, their cold stress. So they're going to try to make their nests near places of consistent sources of heat. Can they live without it? Yeah, they'll just have a big enough nest and live in that, to be sure. Just being inside of a house is a heat source, right? But if they have a choice of having a nest near, let's say, a refrigerator motor that's running regularly, or a pilot light that's with a gas hot water heater, or even an electric hot water heater that's consistently warm, or perhaps recessed lighting that's regularly on or frequently on, those are sources of heat. That reduces the need for that rodent to get more food, because it's not burning off all these calories trying to keep itself warm. So how does this work out practically? You need to focus on areas with heat. Stoves, refrigerators, freezers, hot water heaters, furnaces, lights that are on for long periods of time. Think about what could be sources of heat within that house. Even areas like if you're looking in a garage and the garage is attached to the house, focus your attention on the wall that adjoins the garage, because that's going to be the warm wall. That also means if you're going to be, so that's where you want to look for the feces. And can you use a black light? Yeah. Is it really worth it? Probably not. Why? Because the mouse, along with urine, is also dropping feces, and you don't need a black light to see the feces. So spend some time, get a good, powerful flashlight when you're going inside of a house. Get it up there to do 500 lumens or more. Get something that can concentrate your attention, right? And you want to be looking for those black droppings, about 1/4 of an inch. And you need to be getting into that and making sure you're looking for those areas, because mice are going to keep putting those feces. And why are those feces important? Because that's where you want to put your traps. And I'm hoping you're going to do trapping first before you're using bait stations, but it's your business. You do it how you want. I'm just going to make some recommendations here for you to consider. But those are the locations where you want it. Don't just simply line your traps up like you're doing a grid pattern. No, you want to put the traps and your bait stations in the locations where they're going to be effective. So do your inspection. Explain to your client the importance of what mice are doing to the structure. Okay, so those are two things. Now, once you have done your inspection, now we're going to get into the issues of control. What's another mistake that technicians make? Not using enough traps. I was shadowing a company that was working for a commercial facility, and they were amazed as well. And they were asking me how I could help them. And they said their client the client would not allow them to put more traps out. I was like, what? I couldn't believe it. And so they said they didn't want traps all over the place. And I was like, well, yeah, I don't want traps all over the place either, but you got to be for a building that's probably 10,000 square feet. You're going to have something more than just 4 or 5. And that was basically, I was stunned. So that was the client's fault, right? You have to make sure that you as a professional, that you're not making the mistake of not using enough traps. So how many traps do I recommend if you're dealing with a 1,200 square foot house? 24. Now, can you go a little lower than that? Sure. Can you go higher than that? Absolutely. Traps are like money. More is better. So don't be afraid of traps. So have lots of them. You should have boxes of snap traps, whatever version you like. I would recommend, in terms of cost, the wooden ones are the cheapest, right? The snap traps are the cheapest, and you want to be sure you're using expanded trigger traps, not the little thin metal triggers. You want expanded trigger traps. A lot of your newer traps are all expanded trigger. Why is that? Because they're more effective. And they offer you additional options in your trapping. So we're not really going to talk about how you're trapping here today. We're talking about some of the major areas. I think most of you already know how to trap mice. So when you're done your inspection and you find those active areas, you're going to trap those aggressively. But you're also probably going to put some traps around, you're just to see what happens. Putting your traps up on sill plates on the foundation level. You're going to maybe put some traps up into the attic area, depending on your situation. You're going to put those traps underneath sinks and around refrigerators and around stoves and ovens. Being cognizant of children and pets and people's need to live their lives. That's what you're going to do, but you need to be sure you're doing it a lot. And then what you're going to do is you're going to bait those traps, but you're not going to set them. You're like, Stephen, that's going to waste time. No, it's not. What you're trying to do is you're trying to determine the level of activity and get those mice comfortable coming to the traps. So if you set, let's say 3 or 4 traps sort of in a cluster area because you saw some heavy activity there, and you're putting the bait on your trap, and all of a sudden you come back the next day and all the bait's gone. I would add more traps and rebait them again. And then come back the next day and then see how things go. Is all the bait gone again? Well, then you may want to do it one more time and add more traps. The idea being is you want to try to catch all the mice in a sense at once. Now that may not always be possible, but you want it to go from a population level up here to like this. You don't want to just kind of gradually bring it down, right? Because you might be educating other mice who don't want to do that. And it needs to go from here and then bang, like a cliff. So that would be a key mistake. And I understand there's a time element involved there, but if you're using enough traps, you can clear out this house in a couple of days. But you have to coordinate that with your client. If that's not possible, then you can certainly just use a bunch of traps, come back the next day, remove the bodies, and then maybe follow up with a rodenticide program. I would encourage us as an industry to try to use traps more to lower the population of rodents down before we're using rodenticides. You look what happened in California. I mean, it's tragic. It's unfortunate. I understand it. I understand the rationale. There's going to be consequences with that. But part of the problem, and to be fair, it's on us, right? Because we haven't always used rodenticides properly. And sometimes we've used them as a crutch. I have a pet peeve with our bait stations. I wish that bait manufacturers would create bait stations with a sliding door so I could slide it from a rat-sized hole down to a mouse-sized hole. Voila. Because a lot of times we're not dealing with rats. So why do we have this large hole allowing larger animals to get into that rodenticide? Why are we doing that? I was talking with one manufacturer rep and she said, well, people can modify it on their own. I think, yeah, they can, and they're responsible to do that. But are they going to do that? I mean, if you're buying, let's say 200 rat stations, right? So you're going to spend the time to modify all those openings? Really? I have some videos on YouTube. I hope you've checked them out on how to make some adjustments in this. But then if you're in an area where there's large dogs and the dogs are attacking your bait stations, I mean, are you really going to use a mouse-sized station? Bell Labs has one. I'm using it. It's nice. But for those of you that need a rat-sized bait station, it's too small, right? Because a dog can kind of get his mouth around it. I don't have really an issue with free-ranging dogs out here, nor do we have raccoons around this area. We do have raccoons in Montana, but they're pretty thin and far between and focused really a lot of times on in farm areas, right? Or out in the woods. We really don't have a lot of them in urban areas. So the question that you have to ask yourself is, how are you using your rodenticide? Are you using it appropriately, right? So if we can reduce our use of rodenticides, that's all the better. All right, so let's kind of summarize where we're at again when we're dealing with mistakes that technicians make dealing with commensal rodents. Well, one, we need to be sure we're telling our clients the structural damage that mice do. Number two, we need to be thinking about our inspection. Are we really doing a thorough inspection? The inspection's finding those entryways and also properly identifying the animal, and we're also identifying the activity areas. We will need that information to properly control. If you're just interested in harvesting mice rather than removing mice from that structure, then do what you're doing now. Okay, so a lot of you'll probably put your kids through college with it, right? So I just think as an industry we need to do better than that. Then you need to be thinking about trying to use your traps properly. Lots of traps in the areas where you see activity. Pre-bait them first without setting them. Monitor them for it. Come back the next day or 2 days. Add more traps if you're seeing additional activity, and then set them all at once. And then try to hammer all that population at once. Then do a follow-up with your rodenticides. And again, where are you putting your rodenticide stations? Well, you're putting them in places where you see activity. And again, you're thinking about heat, right? Where are the mice going to be? Heat and areas that are going to be difficult to get to. If you're just putting your traps where you can just walk around and see them all without having to bend down and get on your knees, you're likely doing it wrong. Because mice aren't just walking around willy-nilly in the middle of the floor, just la-da-da. No, they're crawling around the edges. They want to get behind things. They're always afraid of something going to go eat them. Now, if you're dealing with an empty house, yeah, you'll probably see droppings in the middle of the floor because the mice get comfortable with where they're living. But for places where there's activity, probably not, right? So that would be the next thing. Another mistake that technicians make, or maybe I should say companies, because the technician isn't coming up with this idea, over-reliance on glue boards. Now, do glue boards catch mice? Yep. But according to Dr. Corrigan, you're catching the juveniles. Well, we need to catch the juveniles. Yeah, but you'll catch them with the traps as well, snap traps as well. The problem with glue boards is mice have these vibrissa, which is their whiskers, and they're looking out in front of them, and they're exploring their world. And if they get their vibrissa, the adults will have longer vibrissa than the juveniles, and they will feel that glue board. And once they pull out, if that vibrissa, it's like connected to a nerve ending. Think of it as an extension of their nervous system. And when they put that vibrissa into the glue and that gets yanked out, they're never forgetting that. So you'll find them just jumping over your glue boards. Now the juveniles, their vibrissa isn't as long, so as they're scurrying along, they can run right into the glue board and all of a sudden they're caught because it's too late for them. And you think, oh, I caught my mouse. Yep, you did. But did you get the adult? That's a problem. Now, am I wanting to ban glue boards? Nope. Not interested in glue. Glue boards have an important role for insect control, and there are going to be situations where for whatever reason, traps are going to be avoided, and you need to change it up. But often I would suggest that's probably been because a mistake's been made or someone else was trapping ahead of you and got some animals educated. Okay. So if you're just walking out to your client and throwing around a bunch of glue boards, again, it may look great for you or whatever. It may be convenient, but it's really not solving a problem. It's probably creating more of a problem. Can you get lucky? Sure. Understand when we talk about wildlife and vertebrates, we're always talking about averages, right? When we talk about how much does a raccoon weigh or how many young does a female have, we're never talking about specifics. We're talking about averages. What is the average number? That means there's going to be some higher than that number. There's going to be some lower than that number. I tell people, look, and they'll say, does an animal do that? And I'll say, well, do you have a crazy uncle? There's always someone in your family that's just a little on the outside of things. Same way with wildlife. Is that a crazy mouse? When we say that mice aren't afraid of new things, they're neophilic, they call it. They love new things. And that's generally true. But as Corrigan said, it's not always true. It's not true for every mouse, right? So you have to think about, as professionals, we need to think about the outliers. How are we making sure that we're not creating more outliers through education? Okay? Another mistake that technicians make with commensal rodents is a failure to convince clients of the importance of modifying their buildings. Guys, ladies, we need to be doing a lot more exclusion work for people. Even if you're not going to be in the business of exclusion, can we at least close gaps around pipes? Can we at least help them with door jams? Can we at least do the simple stuff? And maybe call a wildlife control operator in your area if you're a pest control guy, or if you're a wildlife control operator, get some training to expand your repertoire in terms of your exclusion work. Every client's not going to hire it because every client cannot afford it, or perhaps they don't care. But we can't do it if we're not willing to sell it and do it for them. We're becoming an increasingly specialized country where people are losing some of those handyman skills. And they're like, if I'm a lawyer and I'm making $300 an hour writing a brief, do I really want to be spending an hour of my time working on filling gaps around pipes that you would maybe charge me $75? Does that make sense? I could probably pay, do a couple of hours work and pay you to do all the gaps around my pipes in my house, and maybe for $800 or $900, depending on how soft the house is, maybe I could do, three or four briefs, boom, I'm done, and I haven't worried about falling off a ladder. Okay, so this is but we can't do that if we don't offer it to them. And I have a video on filling a gap around a pipe. I think it's a minute long. Okay, go up on YouTube, check it out. It's really that simple, right? And so do a little. Anything helps, right? It's like I tell people, picking a penny up off the ground won't make you a millionaire, but it makes you one penny closer. So yeah, can mice get in if you fill a gap, and can they still get underneath the garage door? Yep, they probably can. But you've stopped one hole. All right, can we do that? Let's just don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. All right? We need to get clients to modify their bird feeders or remove their bird feeders and make changes around their structures. Let me tell you something. Bird feeders were my best friend when I was in business. That was just money in the bank. People would say, "Oh, my bird feeder's far away from the house." And I would say, "That's great, ma'am. It just means it takes longer for the mice to get to your house." Bird feeders create food sources for animals, and healthy, well-fed females have large litters, and they carry all of the young will survive. So you can create a population explosion just by adding more food. It's called supply-side economics. Where there is a supply, there will be a demand to meet it. That's basically it. Create the food source, you will have lots of mice. Okay? You have to somehow get your client to listen to you to get that modified out. I have a publication, Google my name, Van Tassel, bird feeders, and you will find this publication. It'll talk about how to modify bird feeders to reduce unwanted animals. No additional charge, just download it. It's a multiple page publication. I think you'll find it helpful. And I would like to see more pest controllers get into bird feeder modification. Some of the modifications require no technical skills at all. So you at least teach your client, hey, do this. That will reduce the problem. May not eliminate it, but again, anything helps if we can reduce food source. Because remember, when we have less food for animals, it makes your bait or traps more attractive to them as well. I think that's covered enough for today. Those are certainly some of the big issues. So why don't we go through it one more time. Number one, tell your client about the importance of the structural damage that rodents cause inside buildings. There's disease issues too, but I don't want to overhype that. If you're dealing with deer mice, hantavirus is definitely a concern. Okay, but that's not a. I think I did a hantavirus presentation already in the previous podcast. Second, do your inspection. Look for heat. Do a thorough inspection. Find those activity areas. That's where you want to place your traps and bait stations. Try to trap first. Use enough traps. 24 for a 1,200 square foot house. You can use less depending on your situation. Maybe your part of the country, the housing construction, is a little bit different, right? You'll learn, but you need to be evaluating what are standard things and be willing to add more traps. Traps are like money, more is better, right? And you can use them in situations that are unbaited as well. That's one of the advantages of your expanded trigger traps. Don't just simply bait everything. Sometimes you can do blind sets with mice. Try to trap before you use your toxicants. Try to modify your bait stations so that if you're only dealing with mice, modify those those rat-sized bait stations down to a 1-inch hole so you can keep out larger animals. Try to get your clients to modify their bird feeders. Remove those food sources. That is absolutely critical for long-term effectiveness. and then finally help them with exclusion. Get the skills you need, get the training to at least begin the process of trying to offer the service to your clients. I was talking with one pest controller. They didn't know how to do it, and so I was showing them how to do it, so I got the video. And I looked at him and I said, do you think you could charge $25 for that and make money? And they're like, yeah. I said, I might charge more. Whether their time schedule, but we were there literally. I'm thinking they went to their vehicle, got the materials. I cut it. I think counting that time and our conversation, and I was videotaping it, I think total was 15 minutes because they were already there. They were already doing work. And I said, can we just do this? And they're like, yeah. $25. That's, at 15 minutes, it's $100 an hour. So plus material, when you think of the materials, what did it cost them in materials? Let's say they had to throw away the caulking gun, all right, because it goes bad. Well, what is that? $8? So maybe charge 40. That's what we need to be doing for our clients. And I hope these are some tips to help you become more effective, reduce those callbacks. There's certainly more to talk about when it comes to rodents, but that's enough for now. My name is Stephen Van Tassel, Wildlife Control Consultant. I'm hoping that you're going to be sending me some emails. Tell me what you think of the program that you would like for me to discuss on. Vertebrates, of course, that's where my emphasis is on. Reach out, tell me what we're doing right, tell me what we're doing wrong. If you have a new product, if you're a manufacturer, you're a dealer or something, we'd love to talk with you as well about getting you on the show and talking about your product and services. You can reach me at wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. That's wildlifecontrolconsultant@gmail.com. Check us out, and remember, we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. I'm Stephen Van Tassel, Wildlife Control Consultant, giving you another episode of Pest Geek Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Take care.